Hi, Eric. So yes, this presentation will be recorded. I don't think we have plans to post it to our website, but if people are interested, I think maybe you can send us an email, let us know, and we could send it out to you after the presentation. All right, to everybody just joining, we're just going to wait about one more minute. Feel free to keep yourselves on mute during the presentation. And thank you for joining us here today. All right, everybody, I'm going to go ahead and get started. My name is Trevor Brandt. I'm an international student advisor here with the OISS. I've probably worked with a couple of you on your immigration needs. And today we're going to be covering F1 student off-campus employment. So that is curricular practical training and optional practical training. So if you do have any questions during the presentation, feel free to post them in the chat. We will not be answering questions right away, but we're going to cover the CPT section first. And then after, we're going to have a little break where I'm going to answer some questions specifically about CPT. And then we're going to cover the OPT section. And at the end of the OPT section, you'll have another chance to ask any questions about both OPT and CPT. So yeah, if you do think of any questions, you can post them in the chat window, or you can save them for the specific question time. And I'll try to answer everything, scrolling back to the top and seeing what you posted throughout the presentation. Yeah, I'll try and get all of your questions answered here today before you leave. So let me see. And yeah, at the end of the presentation, there will be a feedback survey that's sent out to you via Shoreline. If you wouldn't mind filling that out, they would provide some very useful information to our office. So that'd be great if you could check Shoreline. I'm not sure if that's an email or if it goes directly to your Shoreline account, but yeah, you may have to check your Shoreline account and the messages, and it'd be great if you could provide some feedback. So let's go ahead and get started. So what is CPT? CPT, which is an acronym for Curricular Practical Training, is an F1 authorization for any paid or unpaid off-campus employment. So that's a very common question. Can my CPT be unpaid? And the answer is yes. And in fact, all employment, whether paid or unpaid, if it is taking place off campus, it does need a CPT authorization in order for you to participate in that employment. So the purpose of CPT is to gain practical knowledge in your field of study. All F1 students must receive CPT authorization before participating in any off-campus work or risk violating their F1 status. So some of the questions I get are, how exactly would that come up if you do, excuse me, if you do end up violating your F1 status? It's probably not something that the government would know about immediately unless you did report it to the government yourself. but it's something that could come up in a future visa interview. So if you're interviewing for another F1 visa, perhaps an H1B or any other visa type, they might ask to see previous records of employment. It's something that if it was reported on your taxes or something like that, it could affect you negatively. And this is all if you only if you don't follow the F1 regulations, and if you're actually engaging in employment that goes against these regulations. So yeah, basically, if you're working, on campus at UCSB, you can work any position. You don't necessarily have to worry about getting an authorization, but for anything else off campus, make sure you're getting the correct authorizations and you're following the CPT and OPT regulations. So CPT is for working off campus pre-graduation and OPT is for after graduation. So relation to major. Any off-campus employment must be directly related to your major and must be processed through CPT. So yeah, off-campus employment before graduation. A good rule to remember about this is that around 90% of your job duties should have a direct correlation to your degree objectives. This is because the government only allows international students to work if it is considered a part of their educational curriculum. So the government doesn't want you to be working a job that's not related to your field of study. They consider any sort of employment, any sort of off-campus employment to be a part of your education. And so that's why these requirements are so strict, is because they want you to be learning something that directly relates to your field of study. If you are curious if a position relates to your field of study, like I mentioned, the presentation says here, you can look at the degree objectives for your specific major. Every major usually has this posted on their website. If you go to the website for your major, you can usually find some degree objectives or learning objectives. You can ask your major advisor about this. And basically, you just want to look at those objectives and see if the actual job duties are very closely related. Sometimes you have these positions where, it might be 50% related to your major, 50% not related to your major. In that event, the safest thing to do would be to not work that position, just because you don't want to risk violating any sort of immigration regulations. But yeah, again, if it's 90% related, but there's only one small little part of it that's unrelated, then that should be safe for you to work that position. So again, you can talk to your major advisor, you can talk to our office about this, and we'll help you to determine if there is a direct relation. If you're having a difficulty finding jobs directly related to your major, then I definitely recommend, I don't know if I put this in the presentation, but I definitely recommend working with career services. And they can help you to come up with job search strategies, and also provide you with different networks where you might be able to find jobs that are directly related to your field of study. So eligibility, you must be in active F1 status at the time of the your application. So obviously, fully registered in 12 units if you're an undergraduate. You do need to have a minimum GPA of 2.5 in order to be approved for CPT. And you need to have completed one full academic year, which is basically 9 months of consecutive full-time study. So that needs to be fall, winter, spring. If you don't participate in the summer, that's okay, since it's a non-mandatory quarter. But if you do take a leave of absence, for example, let's say you take a break from school, you leave the country, we terminate your I-20, and you need to come back on initial I-20 with a new CVIS ID, then at that point, you would need to wait an additional 3 quarters after returning in order to be eligible for CPT. So, and yeah, I did list here be enrolled full-time. And then you need to have not accumulated more than 12 months of full-time CPT at your current education level if you're planning to apply for OPT. So that means that, obviously full-time CPT is only allowed during scheduled school breaks. So that could be the summer, that could be, spring break, winter break. You're allowed to work full-time, so that's more than 20 hours per week. During the school year, you can only work up to 20 hours per week, you know, in your CPT, as well as with your on-campus position and, you know, combined between the two. So if you're working 10 hours on campus, then you can only work 10 hours on your CPT. I think this might be in a future slide, but yeah, just to clarify, with full-time CPT, you can only work up to 12 months of full-time CPT. So maybe all 4 summers that you're here during your academic program or your undergraduate program, maybe you work a total of 12 months of your full-time CPT. Once you reach that 12-month point, then you are no longer eligible for OPT. Now, it doesn't mean that if you work 1 month of full-time CPT, then you lose 1 month of full-time or OPT. It only means that if you reach 12 months maximum of your full-time CPT, so cumulative 12 months of full-time CPT, then you just are no longer eligible for full-time or for OPT at all. So if you work, you know, 11 months of full-time CPT, you're still eligible for OPT. It's just when you cross over into that 12-month period. So we'll definitely review this when you do apply for full-time CPT. We'll review to make sure that you know, you're not reaching that 12-month limit. And most students don't encounter this. It's just if you're fully taking advantage of full-time CPT, this might come up for you. So let's see. So when to apply? CPT authorization is issued on a quarter-by-quarter basis. A new application must be submitted for each term you will pursue CPT. So if you are applying for a part-time position that takes place from maybe the beginning of the fall quarter to the end of the winter quarter, then you will have to separate that into 2 separate applications. So one for the fall quarter and then one for the winter quarter. And you are responsible for submitting that new application at the end of your you know, first period of OPT or CPT. And ideally you can submit them, you know, both at the same time. So you could submit your first fall application and then you could submit your winter application right after that, or as soon as the internship course is available, which we'll be getting to that section. But yeah, you're definitely responsible for keeping track of when your CPT ends. And then if you want to extend it at all, you'll need to submit that additional application. So the Oyss needs at least 3 weeks to process your CPT request. You know, technically our processing time for this is 2 weeks, but we ask that you submit it 3 weeks in advance, because if there's any errors or issues with your CPT application, we will need you to go back to your employer, maybe ask for a change on your offer letter, and that can take additional time. So that's why we ask for that 3 weeks. Once you've gathered all the required documents, you can then apply for CPT. Part-time versus full-time, I covered this a bit earlier. But yeah, during the academic year, CPT can only be part-time, less than 20 hours per week. Some exceptions can be made if you're participating in the UC-DC program. During the summer, CPT can be full-time, and during other scheduled school breaks. You know, we already covered the 12 months of full-time CPT. And if you're I already covered this as well. If you're working on campus during the academic year, then you cannot exceed 20 hours of work total per week between your CPT position and your on-campus position. So required documents. Hopefully most of you have used UCSB Global by this point. This is our online platform. It's available through our website, where you can apply for basically any sort of immigration request with the Oyss. It's all available through this platform. So you'll just look under the employment e-forms and you'll find the CPT, the curricular practical training request, and you'll be asked to enter your employment details and upload the following. So you'll need to upload a job offer letter. So you do need to have a job offer before you apply for CPT. You'll also need to upload an advisor letter. So this is a letter from your undergraduate advisor that just confirms that the CPT is related to your major. And then you'll also need to upload proof of enrollment in a class requiring an internship. So every major has one of these courses, an internship course that you can take over the summer. You do get credits for the internship typically. You might be required to, you're not required to physically show up to that class or participate online. It's usually just at the end of your course, you might need to submit, a very brief essay just explaining the concepts that you learned from your internship and how those apply to your major. Usually those are just a 1-unit course. So for the job offer letter, the letter basically just has to contain specific information in order to comply with government regulations. We're required to enter some of this information in CBIS when we're providing you with the authorization. If your original job offer letter does not contain all the required information, you might need to specifically ask them to add to that job offer letter. And if they're, once in a while, we might have a company that doesn't want to change the job offer letter for whatever, whatever their internal process is. They like to have, the offer letter remain as is. So in those events, you can actually submit an email confirmation from your supervisor that contains the missing information, but it's not something you need to worry about right now. These details are listed in the CPT application and on the OISS website. I chose not to include them here because it's some pretty fine detailed information that you probably won't remember right now. It's usually just the hours that you're going to be working, your rate of pay, your job duties, things like that. So these are listed in the CPT application and on the OISS website. So the letter from your academic advisor, is going to be familiar with this letter. Typically they process, excuse me, a high volume of CPT requests, and they have a template that they use that they just plug your information into. But yeah, it's designed to help prove that your employment is related to your major and is a required part of the curriculum. So if the government ever does do an audit, we do have that email that letter that we can provide to show that it is related to your major. And technically, yeah, the government doesn't want you to participate in employment that's not required for the curriculum. So that's why the course registration is necessary, so that it is a required part of that course. The OISS has a full list of letter requirements available within the CPT request form. Like I mentioned, your department is going to already be familiar with these. All right, looks like we have a few new people joining us who we just let in. If you could put yourselves on mute. And then there's a few slides that we already covered. We are recording this. So if you'd like to obtain a recording of this presentation, just feel free to send us an email and we can provide you with the recording. You can watch any parts that you missed. All right, so proof of course enrollment. I already mentioned this. Your academic advisor will be able to inform you what the correct course is to register in. Sorry, somebody was off of mute. I selected the option to keep everybody on mute, but still 2 years in and still learning new things about Zoom. So you'll need to ask your major advisor what the correct courses to enroll in. Then you'll upload a copy of your class schedule from Gold showing that you've enrolled in this course. And yeah, one other thing to keep in mind is that some departments may have a limit on how many times you can participate in a CPT course. It's not, they don't call it a CPT course, they call it usually an internship and industry course. So sometimes you can only take that course maybe 2 times, maybe 4 times. So, there's no limit on how much part-time CPT you can participate in, but yeah, your department may have a limit on how many times you can participate in that course. So something to keep in mind and maybe ask your department advisor about. So CPT does take, as I mentioned before, 10 business days to process. Once approved, you will receive a new I-20 with CPT authorization. You cannot start working until you've actually received this I-20. So even if you have submitted a CPT request, especially if you submitted it in under that 10 business day time frame, maybe you submit it 5 business days before you're supposed to start working, you're not automatically authorized just because you submit the request. you do need to wait for that new I-20. And if you submit it in under that 10 business day time frame, we may actually request that you change your offer letter and you push back your employment to fit in with that time frame. So just make sure to contact Oyss in advance if you want to change employers, change or cancel CPT authorization dates, or extend your CPT employment period. So now I'll be taking questions about CPT before we move on to the OPT section of the presentation. I'm just going to go through some of the questions that were already asked at the top here, and then I'll get down to all the questions below. Bowen asks, if we want to apply for a summer internship, when is a good time to apply for CPT? As long as it's more than 3 weeks in advance of the start of the position, you can apply whenever you'd like to, and whenever you're able to register in the internship course. So, waiting for your past time to be able to register in that internship course. As soon as you're able to register in that and you've received the job offer, you're welcome to apply for CPT. Let's see. Summer, fall, and winter be considered for 9 months of consecutive full study. So yeah, if you started your program at the beginning of summer, or if you came back from a leave of absence and came back at the beginning of summer, you would need to register in a full course load for summer. It's not 12 units, it's only 6 units. Summer, you can work, you can participate in half of the normal unit requirement in order to be considered full-time. So yeah, as long as you're registered in 6 units for summer, and then you participate in fall and winter, that would be considered your 9 months of consecutive full-time study. Somebody asked a very similar question. Let's see here. Double major, still 12 months. Yeah, that requirement would be the same. It's, if you work full-time 6 months on one major, full-time 6 months on another major, that's still limited at 12 months total between the two. If the internship is with a non-UCSB organization but occurs on campus property, do we still need to apply for CPT? I'd say probably yes, just to be safe. And yeah, I apologize for everybody who was in the waiting room. I wasn't seeing that popping up. We do have another advisor in here who I thought had the permissions to let people in the waiting room, but maybe didn't. So yeah, I apologize if you're in the waiting room and missed part of the presentation. Feel free to request the recording and we can provide that for you. The best place to find CPT job opportunities, like I mentioned, I'd recommend working with career services. And I also would recommend, you can check online. If you don't have a LinkedIn is a really good thing to have. It's a professional social networking site. There's a lot of job opportunities posted on there. But yeah, I'd say career services, they'll be able to let you know about all the best places to find, CPT job opportunities. You probably just be looking for, any job opportunities. There's not like a specific list just for CPT jobs. But yeah, it can be, internships might be the easiest thing to get, as part of your academic program. So, they definitely have a list of internships. How many hours maximum and able to work for CPT during the summer? That would be a 40-hour week maximum. Let's see here. I'm just skipping over any duplicate questions. If I need a CPT for the spring quarter, but may change employers during summer, does my new employer need to know that and do anything for me? If you do change employers, you'll just need to submit a brand new CPT application. You don't have to inform your new employer, about anything in particular. It'll just be the same process for each separate employer. Yes, you do need to register. You do need to be registered in, at least a 1-unit internship course over the summer in order to do CPT. Let's see here. Do employers generally accept international students if they haven't been authorized to work? Employers oftentimes aren't necessarily informed about international student work authorization. So yeah, an employer may accept you without the correct authorization. I see Paula has a clarifying question. Paula, I'm just going to take you off mute if you want to ask your question.
Yeah, thank you. So my question is a little confusing because I was thinking of interning in Europe, and I know it's in another country, but if I do intern in the UK, let's see, but then it's for an American company, would that count, or I don't need any authorization because it's outside of the country? Like, because I'm looking right now and I'm doing interviews and it is in England, so it's now located in the United States. So I just want to make sure I'm safe if I do have to apply for something. I was told in the past by one of your advisors that I do not need it because it's outside the country, but I just want to make sure. And also clarify the campus jobs, because I was told I work on campus and I was told all the time that if you work on campus, you don't need to apply for CPT. So those two things. So.
Yeah, I mean, as far as the on-campus position, if it's for a different organization, especially if a different organization is paying you, then you would need CPT. Or yeah, you would need CPT. If there's no paycheck involved and it's on campus, I mean, it depends if you have like a UCSB supervisor. That one's a bit more complicated. I just recommend touching base about that again, if there's any confusion about that. As far as the overseas position, yeah, if you're working outside of the US, no need for CPT. If you are working like remotely for a US, like let's say you go back to your home country for the summer and you want to work for a US employer, with an actual, like you're actually reporting to somebody in the US, you're working for an office in the US, then in that case, you might want CPT. It's a little confusing. Again, I just recommend meeting with an advisor about that question. But yeah, if you're just going to the UK and you're working like for an office in the UK, even if it's technically a US company, then you wouldn't need CPT for that. All right. Best places to look for internships. I covered that one. Doesn't have to be offered through the school. Can definitely be offered outside of the school. If you're graduating in the spring, but you want to apply for CPT in the spring and then applying to OPT. So yeah, you can definitely work CPT during your final quarter. You would just need to make sure you apply for CPT before applying for OPT. And let's see here. And then, yeah, you wouldn't be able to work CPT until you'd have to end at your graduation date and then wait until the OPT is approved before continuing the position on OPT. Trung, yeah, if I finish my graduation requirements, but I need to complete summer to get my OPT, can I petition to enroll and reduce course load and still maintain status as a full-time student? Yes, you can do that. CPT required for unpaid internship in the US? Yes, that's correct. It is required. Yeah, unfortunately, you can't work an unpaid position. I think I mentioned this earlier, but yeah, you also can't even start training for your position, whether it's paid or unpaid, until you have that CPT authorization. You can receive either a physical or digital I-20. Like I mentioned before, it takes about 3 weeks. Yeah, Paula, why don't we just touch base? You can either send me an email or send an email to the main inbox, and we can discuss more about this. Yeah, if you've already met with Madison about this, and she's clarified this, then yeah, you can just go with what Madison said. But if it is, yeah, if there is payment, I think that's the main thing. If you're being paid and receiving a paycheck from a separate organization, usually we recommend CPT. But yeah, maybe if Maddie was able to gather some more information about your situation, you can touch base with her about it, or just go with the advice she's already provided you with. Yes, you can only submit a CPT application once you're able to register for the internship course on Gold. That is correct. All right, thanks for your questions, everybody. I think I got all of them for now. If there's anything I missed, feel free to ask it during our second question section at the end of the presentation. I'm going to move on to OPT just so we have enough time to fully cover this section. I'm going to take a sip of water first. So OPT is also an authorization, a work authorization. It's given by an organization called Uscis. So you might hear that acronym a few times during this presentation, and you might want to remember that during your OPT presentation, or sorry, during your OPT application. And so yeah, OPT, again, it can be paid or unpaid employment. It must be full-time, at least 20 hours per week. And you can work multiple positions to fill this requirement. Your employment should match with your degree level. For example, if you receive a master's degree, then you should apply for a job where a master's degree is strongly desired. Same goes for bachelor's or PhD. During your OPT, you are still an F1 student and your status is monitored by the Oyss. STEM majors can apply for a 24-month extension after your first year of OPT. So that can be done within your 3 months. So that can be done 3 months before the end of your OPT period, anytime during that 3-month window. From month 9 to month 12, if you're a STEM major, you can submit an application for your 24-month extension. Am I eligible to apply? So you must be in valid F1 status at the time of application, must complete 3 consecutive quarters at UCSB prior to graduation. So if you are a senior and you're considering a leave of absence, that's definitely something to consider. Whether you're going to take that leave, because when you come back, you might be required to participate in 3 consecutive quarters before you can apply for OPT. And then you also cannot have been approved for OPT before at your current education level. So if you're currently studying at the bachelor's level and you're going to be graduating with a bachelor's degree, if you've already graduated with a bachelor's degree at a previous school or even at UCSB, and then you've already applied for OPT at that previous level, you will not be granted an additional authorization at the same degree level. So if you have already participated in OPT at a bachelor's level, then if you would need to wait until you completed a higher degree level to apply for an additional OPT period. So like I mentioned before, you've not completed 1 year of full-time CPT. Otherwise, your OPT application will be denied. And you do not need a job offer in advance to apply for OPT. So this is a question that I get a lot. CPT, you need the job offer first before you can apply for CPT. OPT, you do not need any job offer in advance in order to apply for OPT. Usually the way it goes is you apply for OPT first, and then once you are approved, then you can start working and you report your job to the government through an online portal. So timeline, you are allowed to apply up to 90 days before and 60 days after the end of your program. So in total, this is a 5-month period that you have to apply for your OPT. We definitely always recommend applying sooner rather than later. If you apply after your graduation, it's possible that you're going to lose some of your overall 12 months of OPT. So applying sooner is better than leaving it to the last minute. Obviously, if you leave it to the last minute, there's also the chance that it may not get approved. Again, it takes 10 business days for Oyss to process your application. On average, USCIS takes 3 to 4 months to review and approve your application. So it's a very long time. Again, a good reason to apply sooner so that you can work as soon as possible after your graduation. Oyss cannot request an expedited review of your application. We don't have a special relationship with USCIS. In fact, it's actually kind of difficult to reach their customer service sometimes. So yeah, we definitely don't have a way to help speed up that application once it's been submitted to USCIS. You will have to choose an OPT start date that will fall within your 60-day grace period. It can be any day within that 60-day grace period. If you want to start working right away, you could choose the day after your graduation. If you want to have a little bit of time to wait after you graduate, then I might recommend selecting the last day of your 60-day grace period as your OPT start date. If you do leave the US during your 60-day grace period and have not applied for OPT, you are not eligible to apply for OPT and you cannot return to the US in F1 status. After successful completion of OPT, you do receive an additional 60-day grace period where you could, leave the US. You have 60 days to leave the US, or you could transfer to a new academic program at that time. Like I mentioned before, you cannot apply for your STEM OPT period during that 60-day grace period. So you have to actually apply for your STEM extension before the end of your first year of OPT. How do I apply for OPT? It's pretty similar. The initial step is pretty similar to CPT, or if you've used Uscis Global at all, pretty similar to some e-forms that you may have already submitted. You'll be asked to upload your most recent I-94. Hopefully everybody is familiar with your I-94 at this point. That's your online record of entry into the United States. You will be asked to pay an OISS processing fee. This is because we do maintain your records for between 1 to 3 years after your graduation, depending if you're on, your 1 year of OPT or your 3-year STEM OPT period. So those fees just have to go towards maintaining that record during that time, as you're not, paying student fees anymore. And then you'll upload the receipt to show proof of that payment. An academic advisor, so that's going to be, College of Letters and Science, College of Engineering, or College of Creative Studies. They're going to be confirming that you will indeed be graduating at the end of, whatever quarter you're applying during. And then the OISS will create a new I-20 for you, much like CPT. So yeah, definitely don't apply for OPT until you've received that new I-20. Like don't apply with USCIS. So the first part of it is you apply with the OISS. The second part is apply with USCIS. We've had some students who have skipped the first step and just applied with USCIS. Of course, you are denied, which does make it more complicated than to submit that secondary application. You will also need to separately complete a USCIS document called the I-765. A lot of these documents have names that are, the I-765, I-94. So sometimes it's a little confusing to separate them, but the I-765, it's about a 7 or 8 page form that you complete. You will need to review our tutorial on our website, on the OISS website, in order to complete this document, as well as to assemble the rest of your application. So that tutorial is going to be really important during the application process. I would definitely recommend just opening up the tutorial as you're applying, and it shows you how to complete every section of the I-765, just to make sure that you don't make any mistakes. There's a few questions in there where if you don't have that background information, you might, answer something incorrectly, which again could cause the application to be denied, sent back, and then you have to start over again. Once your entire application is assembled, you can submit it to USCIS, which is, if you want to know the full name, it's the United States Citizenship and Immigration Services. If you're at any point are pursuing, additional work authorizations or maybe even permanent residency, you'll be, working with USCIS quite extensively. So your requested OPT start date, I covered this already a little bit. The start date must be within 60 days of your program end date. Your I-20's program end date will be updated to match your actual program end date. So, right now it might say a few years in the future, but if you do graduate at the end of the spring quarter, we're going to update it to, June. I don't know what it is. It might be June 10th this year. So yeah, June 10th, 2022, that's going to be your actual program end date. And so you can base your 60-day grace period off of that end date and also determine when you're eligible to start applying based off of that end date. You cannot be employed on or off campus beyond your program end date until after your OPT authorization has been approved and you've received your EAD card, that's Employment Authorization Document card. It's kind of like a little ID that they send you to just confirm that you are eligible to work on OPT. It's going to have a little picture of your face and the dates that you're eligible to work under OPT. Undergraduate students, your program end date can be considered your expected graduation date, which is the last day of the quarter. If you finish your degree requirements and your final courses during the spring quarter, like I mentioned, your end date will be the last day of the spring quarter. Graduate students, I don't know if we have many graduate students in this presentation, but yeah, your program end date is very flexible. The following options are acceptable: date of defense or final exam, quarter end date, or any date within the quarter that you are registered to graduate. Your chosen program end date does not have to match your date of defense, comprehensive exam date, or filing date. Yeah, other than OISS, who must approve my OPT request, I already covered this briefly. In UCSB Global, you'll ask to indicate a second approver who will verify that your ability to graduate, and they're going to receive an email that they have to fill out before the application moves to the next stage. Like I mentioned, for undergraduate students, this is going to be your college advisor. Just confirm that you fulfilled all of your formal degree requirements. For graduate students, this is going to be a graduate student advisor, faculty member or faculty advisor. There should be like one specific person who that's going to be. And the grad advisor is just going to be asked to verify your expected program end date. If you have a specific date in mind, you can work with your advisor and ask them to enter that specific date within your final quarter. So after submitting the OPT request in UCSB Global, we're going to review all of your information and documents for accuracy. We're also going to check and make sure that you meet all other OPT requirements before creating your OPT I-20. If you have any corrections that need to be made, we will reach out and contact you, much like CPT. And once your OPT request has been approved, you'll be provided with an updated I-20 with your OPT recommendation dates on page 2. You will then submit a copy of this new I-20 along with all additional documents to USCIS. We strongly recommend all students to use the online filing option to submit your OPT application to USCIS. In the past, you had to physically mail in your application. This was challenging for a lot of students. It's a big stack of papers. You have to worry about it getting lost in the mail. If your application is approved, you have to wait a long time if your application was received, you'd have to wait like 2 to 3 weeks just to even know if they got it. So thankfully, earlier this year, they introduced online filing. We recommend that you take advantage of it. You'll receive an instant receipt notice and not have to worry about any shipping issues or delays. When you're completing your application, you're going to need the OPT I-20 issued by your OISS advisor, 2 passport size photos. These can be taken at a local, Walgreens or a CVS, maybe even Costco has this service. When you have these photos, you'll then upload them in the online application. You'll need a scan of your passport biographical page, your I-94 record, scans of any previous I-20s that have curricular practical training, or if you had a different CVIS ID, you'll need to upload that I-20 as well, and a United States issued credit card for the USCIS fee, which is right now, I think it's $350, so a little pricey. During the time that you are pending approval, you are still in F1 student status. You are allowed and strongly recommended to stay in the United States, while the OPT application is pending. You can check the status of your application at the USCIS website. You cannot work while you wait for approval. If your expected program completion date is delayed, you may lose time authorized for OPT, So please come see Oyss immediately so we can best advise you if your graduation is delayed. Once approved, you will receive an Ead card with your approved OPT start date. So you won't know your actual OPT start date until you receive your Ead card. Let's say you request a start date of July 17th, for example. If your OPT application is pending and it takes longer, it's not completed by July 17th, then the government will actually move back your start date, and you might get the card and maybe it says August 17th, for example. So yeah, you won't know what that start date is until you actually are approved and receive the Ead card. While you are on OPT, you must report any changes in your employment or local living address to the Oyss within 10 days of the change. So yeah, like with CPT, you get the job, you apply with the offer letter, and then you're approved. With OPT, you apply for OPT, you're approved, and then we don't need to see an offer letter, but you do need to log into UCSB Global and update your employment. Say, hey, I'm working here, it's this many hours, this is my supervisor, and this is how it's related to my major. So you do report that via UCSB Global, and we'll then update SCVP, which is CVIS's. CVIS has a portal called SCVP, and we'll generate a new I-20. And then we'll send you that new I-20. That will be your new primary I-20. It will list your employment on the second page. SCVP, you will actually receive an invitation to use that portal, like to access it yourself, but there's no need for it. Our system takes care of that automatically. And that saves you from having to report it to both SCVP and then report it to our office as well. So you just have to report it the one time. You are allowed an aggregate of 90 days of unemployment during your entire first year of OPT. So during your 12 months of OPT, you're only allowed to have 90 days where you're not working, at least 20 hours per week. So yeah, like I mentioned, in order to stop that unemployment timer, you do have to work at least 20 hours per week. And you'll be responsible, for keeping track of that 90 days yourself. You'll need to keep track of how much time passes between each of your different positions and make sure that you don't reach that 90 days. If you do reach that 90 days, your OPT will be over and you will need to leave the country. If there's any danger of that happening, definitely reach out to our office. We might recommend that you just work an unpaid position, maybe work on campus if you have a connection with a professor on campus. They can maybe help you to get some sort of internship so that you can continue working and remaining here in the US and not reach that 90 days of unemployment. I'm just going to mute this person. If you graduated the STEM major, like I mentioned, you can apply for that 2-year extension. You can't apply for it once your initial OPT period has ended. If you cannot apply for a STEM extension and have not used all of your 90 days of unemployment by the end of your first year of OPT, then like I mentioned, you'll have that 60-day grace period. You're also allowed to transfer to a new school. So let's say if you want to participate in maybe a new graduate program or an additional bachelor's degree, whatever it is, you can request a transfer to that new school at any time during your OPT authorization, but you'll have to stop working once that CVIS release date has passed. So as soon as that release date happens, you'll have to stop working your current position. In order to travel on OPT, you'll need to bring your Ead card, your I-20 with your updated employer information, your passport with valid visa, and a job offer letter. So if you don't, if you've been approved for OPT, or if maybe your OPT is pending and you don't have a job offer yet, we don't recommend traveling. We recommend staying in the US until you have, a job offer and you've been approved for OPT. Otherwise, there's a chance you might be denied at the port of entry. Let's see here. And you can renew an expired visa from outside the US while on OPT. So now I'm just going to go through and answer any questions that were asked during that section. If you have any additional questions, be sure to post it. And I think we have about 9 minutes left. So I'll try to make sure to get to everybody's question. Yanwen asks, how do double majors count? So when you apply for OPT, you're technically applying with both of your majors. You can be working, at a position related to either of your majors while you're on your OPT. And if only one of your majors is a STEM major, then you need to be working a STEM position, a position related to the STEM major in order to apply for the STEM OPT. So like the way that the STEM extension works is you do need to already have a job at that point, a full-time position, in order to apply for the STEM OPT. So yeah, it would have to be a STEM position, but yeah, you can definitely do that. But yeah, you can also apply, you can work with your non-STEM major during only that first year. Barry asks about travel. Yeah, you can definitely travel outside the US once you've received all the documents that I mentioned, Ead Card, job offer, etc. If I graduate in mid-June and choose my OPT start date for mid-August and my OPT gets approved, I get an additional 60 days before I actually start working. No, not necessarily. If your OPT is approved before your start date, then at that point, your 90-day unemployment period will begin. If the application takes longer than your start date, then you'll just need to wait until it's approved, see what that new start date is. As soon as you see, that new start date passes, then that 90-day unemployment period begins. You can use all the 90 days at the beginning to search for a job, or ideally you would save up some of that 90-day period just in case you start working a job, maybe you don't like it, you want to stop and look for another job. You still have those 90 days, to keep your status during that time. Can you submit the OPT request with Oyss before the 90-day application period? Yeah, so 90 days before your graduation, if you want to submit it like 2 weeks before that, so that it's ready to submit as soon as you hit that 90 days before your graduation, you can definitely do that. How many days can I stay in the US after OPT program ends? It would be 60 days. Could I post the slides somewhere so if you can have them for reference? Yeah, I think we might actually post these on the website soon, but if you just like a link to the slides, feel free to send us an email. I'm definitely happy to send those out. If I now have the updated I-20 for OPT, that has the program end date as my graduation date, is there any requirement that asks us to fill out the I-765 form within a time period after receiving the updated I-20? So yeah, when you receive your updated OPT I-20, you do have to send that out within 30 days of that I-20 creation date. I didn't include it in this presentation, but it is in our OPT tutorial. And we also include it in I think we might include it in our approval email. So you do have to submit it within 30 days. If that 30-day period passes, then we will need to create a new OPT I-20. So many dates and timelines to remember with OPT. Yeah, I mentioned travel a bit already. I think I covered that before you received. Yeah, I mean, if your application's pending, you can leave the US, but in order to come back, you would need to have somebody like, maybe you enter a friend's mailing address, and then the Ead card's mailed to your friend's house, and then they would have to send it to you outside of the country. Then you'd have to get the card, get a job offer, and then come back to the US at that point. So yeah, that's why it's usually not recommended. Although in this day and age, it's easier to secure a job from outside of the country. You can do remote interviews and things like that. In the past, it was obviously a lot more difficult. If you were outside of the US, it was hard to get that job offer. So but it's a possibility. Some students have had family emergencies or just wanted to, they already had a job offer. They already were going to mail the card to a friend. So they felt confident leaving, knowing that they could get those materials before they came back to participate in OPT. Will the full year of OPT starting on the program end date or the OPT start date, that year will be considered based off of it'll be based off of the OPT start date. But yeah, again, if you do apply like after your program end date, they might take away some. So let's say, for example, you choose the last day of your 60-day grace period as your OPT start date. If the application takes longer than that, then at that point, you will start losing some of those 12 months of OPT. So by the time, if you apply really late and the application takes a lot longer, maybe you only get 9 months instead of 12 months. Can we reapply for OPT or CPT if failed? Yeah, if CPT specifically, if your application's rejected, I mean, we're just going to let you know what was missing or what was wrong with your application so you can resubmit. CPT is a lot easier because, our office is the one approving it. Common mistakes, just really making sure to review all the requirements, making sure all the information is there. CPT, the most common mistake is that the offer letter does not have everything that we asked for. If it doesn't have, literally every piece of information that we asked for, we will have to deny it. OPT is a little bit more difficult. If you apply really early and your OPT application is denied, then you still have time to resubmit the application. But if you apply really late and it's denied and it's already past your grace period, then at that point, you cannot reapply and you have to leave the country. So golden rule, apply as early as possible. Meg, yeah, you joined the workshop a little late. Feel free to send us an email. We can send you the recording or the slides. Does PBS count as STEM? I am not familiar with the acronym. I apologize. Oh yeah, psychological and brain sciences. Yeah, definitely STEM. Definitely STEM. If I did OPT during community college, is my application different for OPT for my bachelor? Probably a very similar application. And yeah, again, if you did it at an associate's level, you're definitely eligible at the bachelor's level. So it's going to be a very similar application. What if the job offer onboard date is before the OPT start date? Unfortunately, you'd have to ask them to postpone until you are actually approved for your OPT. Even if it's training, you can't participate in training until the OPT start date is passed. If my last quarter is in summer, what would be the best date to apply for OPT? All summer graduates will have an end date of the last day of summer, which is about mid-September. So you can start applying, mid-June for OPT. If it's a nonprofit organization, non-paid, do students still need to apply for CPT? Typically, yes. Anything that can be viewed as like employment or employment experience, you should apply for CPT. Unless it's not related to your major whatsoever and it's not something that you would consider putting, like, for example, if you just want to go volunteer at like, a homeless shelter or something like that, you don't have to put that, authorize that with CPT. But if it's like a nonprofit and it's somewhat related to your major or it's related to like a career position, there's definitely a distinction between those two. You would need to apply for CPT. Is economics STEM now? Yes. If I apply for OPT right now, am I able to apply for it after graduate school? Yes, you're allowed to apply for an additional OPT period after every degree level. If the start date on the Ead card gets delayed past the 60-day grace period, will this count as unemployment days? No, it won't count as unemployment days. They'll give you a new start date to accommodate that. And then it won't, your unemployment time won't start until the actual new start date passes. But you will lose some of the overall, typically the overall OPT period. If I only take summer session A, shouldn't my end date be the beginning of August instead of the end of summer session? Typically, all summer graduates are considered having that, that end date. If for some reason you want to change it, you can reach out to us. But yeah, usually we process all summer graduates with one end date just being the last day of the summer quarter. Can grad students work more hours than CPT? The hour allotment is the same for both grad students and undergrad students. Sometimes grad students can work full-time during the school year, but it's usually only at the very end of their program when they're completing their dissertation, and it's like very strict requirements. So basically, it's typically the same for undergrad and grad students. I'm only doing winter, spring, summer before OPT. Can I just enroll in summer session A with 6 units? If summer's your last quarter before graduation, then you only need to participate in however many units you need to graduate. So even if you just needed like 1 unit to graduate, you could submit a reduced course load request. But yeah, to answer your question, you'd only need to register in 6 units if that's all you need to graduate. I'm graduating from UCSB by spring, but we'll take summer courses. Let's see, 2 sessions, end date early September at another UC. When's the best time to apply for CPT? That's a tricky question. If you don't, I guess, or yeah, OPT, if you don't need those courses to graduate, then they'd be considered incidental. So they're not related to your, while you're on OPT, if you want to take courses that aren't related to any degree whatsoever, you can definitely take those courses at any time. Some econ students will get their CPA during their OPT. So that's allowed. But yeah, if those courses are required for you to graduate, Vergiani, I hope I said that right, then your end date might need to be the end of the summer. I just recommend reaching out to us, maybe scheduling an appointment with an advisor. If graduating in December this year, when do I recommend applying for OPT? That would be about mid-September. If I'm only taking summer session A, can I remain in the US after summer session A ends? Or do I need summer session B as well to remain a valid student? No, you don't need a summer session B. Even if you're graduating during session A, you can remain all the way until the end of summer. That the end of summer will still be your program end date. All right, we have reached the end of our time here. Thank you all for your attention and your great questions. Like I mentioned, if you do have any additional questions, feel free to send me an email. I'll post my email in the chat here. And yeah, if you want the slides, or sorry, I missed an R. And if you want the slides or you want the presentation, you can reach out to me. I'm happy to send those to you. Yeah, you're welcome, everybody. And if you would be happy to fill out that survey, which I think is in your Shoreline account, that would be super helpful. Other than that, thanks, everybody. Happy to do it. And I'll see some of you soon. Have a great day. Thanks, everybody.